to their elders, past, present, and the future. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining us today for our panel discussion on disability, equity and rights in the Pacific. My name's Brentnall. I'm here at Department of Pacific Affairs as a PhD student. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to a wonderful panel of experts today to discuss various different aspects related to disability, equity and rights in the Pacific. Alma Kwambu, who just gave the acknowledgement to country, is the technical advisor for the National Orthotics and Prosthetics Services in Papua New Guinea through the National Department of Health. We also have Kevin Akiki on the right here, or my left, your right. Kevin's right, of the panel, sorry. So Kevin is the Director of Technical Assistance NCD Disabilities Advocacy Agency in Papua New Guinea, and he's also a student in Melbourne at RMIT University. Faatino on the other end, Faatino Utumapu, the General Manager of NOLA, or Nuanua, or Lea'olofa in Samoa, and Tobiah Iakuba, the Office Manager at Tataumatoa in Kiribati. I would also like to acknowledge the support and presence of the broader team who's assisted with preparations today. So Kate Keys-Tilley is here and she'll be helping with the slides, who's travelled from Melbourne with Kevin. And also Sa Ute Lesolo, who's sitting in the front here, who also has many years' experience working with Faatino at NOLA in Samoa. Everyone here is also very much engaged across the region in leadership roles, so do have a look at their bios in the program. We've got lots of experience to draw on here today. Pardon? Tobiah, yeah, I said Tobiah, yeah. So the way it will work today, each panel member will give their presentation for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions. So get those ready. I will now hand over to Kevin.
Thank you, Lee. Daba Namona, everybody. I'm saying good morning in Motu, one of our common languages where we speak in PNG, apart from our over 800 different languages. Before I start, I also like to take this time to acknowledge the ANU Pacific Affairs Department, Lee and the team, for the great job in bringing us together to this forum. And also thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. As you know, we are in challenging times, as they say, and we do not get much opportunity to raise our voices, and we are so privileged to be here. So I will start with the presentation. I have a few slides, but I don't usually refer to slides. I find them not that accessible, even though I use slides as a trainer in my work in this space. So I would like to begin by just setting the scene. And the key message on this slide is that we want to bring the message out that the prevalence rate of disability globally would be increasing. As we all know, we have conflicts happening everywhere. We have natural disasters, which all leads to increasing the prevalence rate. And also, as you can see on the slide, we are mostly referring to the WHO global estimates on the statistics of persons with disabilities, where we now see about 16% of the world's population would make up persons with disabilities. And you can do the math yourself to find the exact figure. And we use that same ratio from WHO. So we are saying about 16% of the total population in the Pacific region would live with some form of disabilities. And as you can see, we are using estimates, and data is really a huge challenge for us. So if you are someone into research in this space, please consider the challenge that we have in developing and least developed countries. There's not so much statistics on persons with disabilities. And also do consider the forms of disabilities, the various causes of disabilities, I mean. So that's on that. If I miss out on anything, I have my colleagues, when they come and speak, they will complement some of the key messages if I miss out on. But I am just speaking on a more broader context. So I'll move to the next slide, Kate. So this is just the definition of disability. Since we are discussing disability, it is as per the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as you can see. But disability is an evolving human rights development agenda. So the definition would vary depending on how we see disability. If we see it from a medical model or medical lens, we see disability from a social lens, or from a charity lens, it will vary. As for me, I like to define disability in my own way. Even I spell disability differently. I spell disability as THISABILITY. So I don't use the D in front, I use T. So disability. So I'd like to focus on my ability. That's how I define disability in my own context. We do respect that disability is evolving, and the definition may vary in various country contexts. So if you are working or doing a research project in a particular country, just be mindful that there may be various definitions of disability that's in line with how the local context or which model of disability they are seeing it. So it would not be the same. I'll move on. The next slide, Kate. So looking at the barriers, there are so many barriers. Disability is a progressive development challenge and development agenda. But I just like to speak on three main barriers or challenges. So as you can see, the three main ones that I have up there, attitudinal, environmental, and institutional barriers or challenges. And coming back to the definition of disability, it's more, for me, I see it as my impairment plus those barriers up there will be, it's equals to disability. So disability is just a condition. It's created by society. So it's not me. If we are able to remove all those barriers, so there won't be any disability. So like I plus B equals D, impairment plus barriers equals disability. But if we get rid of the B, then there would be no D. So that's the like social model of looking at disability, heading towards the rights-based approach of looking at it. So disability is pretty much created by society. And that's the message we have been trying to advocate to our government, to realize that they have to make the environment accessible, so that we remove that condition, and then we only have specific impairments or we only have specific abilities. I'll move on. Okay, yeah. So this is just an update. Please, you can feel free to look it up. When I came and started studying in Melbourne, I learned about the look it up culture here. So like every time when they say, yeah, so I'll look it up. Yes, oh, we'll look it up. It's somewhere there. So yeah, please look it up. This is just an update on like where we are in the Pacific. I might have missed out on some information, but we have a voice in the Pacific Disability Forum, PDF, Secretariat, that's our regional voice. We make up organizations of persons with disabilities. We are affiliated to PDF. And then, of course, we have our framework for disability in the Pacific. Most of our countries in the region now have already ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Few, about 2 or 3 already have laws in place. For Papua New Guinea, because I'm from there, we have a pending disability bill that's still pending. Pending for about 5 years now. Even though some other bills get passed through overnight, our bill is still pending, so I don't know. But that's a challenge that we are experiencing in some countries. So just some progressive updates on where we are in terms of addressing disability inclusion in the Pacific. So I'll move on. So we know that the Sustainable Development Goals has leave no one behind, and it will expire in 2030. We actually had consultations. I personally had consultations with my government, and we raised questions around were we really included in their medium-term development plan, which is derived from the SDGs. And the responses, they usually say, yes, you are included in there. But I used to ask, well, which key result area, like where's the specific framework? Because our medium-term development plan is a huge document. It's like an encyclopedia or something. But then there's nothing, no specific framework specifically on disability. So, and that's in terms of the SDG goals itself. Well, there's no specific goals on disability, but there's a lot of entry points there. It's a bit more flexible for us to identify the entry points. So, yes, it would be really interesting to find out more and have evidence-based research into this space to see if the SDG has truly left no one behind. And that's the question that we raise, and then we want to advocate for. The next framework that's going to be developed, how are we going to be included, I mean, in practical terms, especially for us in the developing and least developed countries in the Pacific. So during my time at RMIT, I've read a few articles on disability, and I've also involved in 2 research on disability myself, but as like a part of the consultation. Like we go in and they pick our brains, and then the document is formulated, and then we have the research happening, and then after that, there's not so much impact. So I managed to see some articles where it sort of confirms that yes, disability is one of the under-researched areas globally, and also we need to do a lot of research on this area within the Pacific, so that we can help our governments to have evidence-based documents to help them to be more inclusive. So I've put up some articles there. I'm not a really academic contact person. I've just started uni after so many years of struggling to get a degree because the education system has failed me. So I'm trying to do a bit of like catch up on my own like journey in education. So Kate, we're on the yes. Yeah. So before I speak on my last slide on the recommendation, I'd like to just mention a bit on the two research that I was involved in. I think it's the previous slide, Kate. Yeah. So they were based on Article 7, that's Rights of Children with Disabilities, and Article 9, Accessibility. I'm making reference to those articles, but in the actual research itself, they didn't make any, I didn't see much of the convention mentioned in there. So if we are doing research in this space, please let's refer to the convention, the articles. If you are doing research in humanitarian response, then it would be Article 11. If you are doing something on accessibility, it will be Article 9. So it would be good to reference the articles in the convention. Both of these research were done, but which I was involved, there wasn't any like sustainable impact. And it was just strictly research based. So it wasn't like integrated into any ongoing programs. So like nowadays when you go into the community and you want to do research, people already know that you have funds to do research. So we have to be like creative to integrate our research programs into existing community programs. So for these two research, which I was part of, it wasn't done that way. It was after the research ended, there was not much impact, and those people that were interviewed, the children with disabilities, their parents came and they wanted to know what's the outcome of the research, what would be its impact. Sadly, we are unable to provide a response to them. So this was some of the gaps that we identified, and which leaves me to move on to my last slide. I'm not really an expert in research. I provide technical advice in the disability space, but I don't have a PhD in this space as well. Well, you don't need a PhD, it's just lived experience. So my recommendations, we want like research into disability space to acknowledge the progressive challenge of implementing the convention. As you can see, I have an article by Chen, and he acknowledges that even Australia, which is a developed nation, also has challenges with implementing the convention, especially dealing with persons who are intellectually impaired. So we have to recognize and acknowledge that the disability sector is a progressive challenge in terms of implementing the convention. And then we want our research to be more localized, more integrated into our existing programs, more contextualized, and it must be more program-based. So you can come to our islands and work with our organizations of persons with disabilities, our government, but integrate the research as if it's like a program-based approach. So we incorporate it into our program instead of we just go and asking people questions and then we go away. So that would also build our capacity and our supporting our organization as well. What else did I miss out? Oh, yeah, and please also take note of the principles of inclusion, which is, I have it up there on the slide: awareness, comprehensive accessibility, effective participation, and twin track approach. Like twin tracking, meaning, when you apply for funding to do your research, make sure you have some funding available to pay for sign language interpreters or additional costs that would cater for our impairment-specific needs if we were to participate in your research. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. I will stop here. I will now hand it over to my colleague from Kiribati, Tabaya. Sorry, Lee, hope I didn't go over time. Thank you.
Hello to everyone. My name is Tabai Yoko from the Tomato. We describe the Tomato as our disability is our partner, and it is our partner until we die. So I am speaking about climate change. So climate change is real and it is not fake. So we explain why. Because it didn't speak about its coming. It comes like a shocker. It doesn't care whether you have a disability or not. So it doesn't give you warning. The UN, the CRPT Article 10 explained that the right to life. So we understand that the countries agree that all people with disabilities have the right to life and will take action, and state will take action to make sure persons with disability can use these rights. The CRPT Article 11 also explained that situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies, and that is the countries agrees that they will respect all our other arrangements they have ended about war or human rights. The countries will take action to make sure that in the case of war, natural catastrophes, or other emergencies, people with disabilities are protected. Climate change and impact on persons with disability. Kiribati is a country that has over 7,000 persons with disabilities facing major issues in their daily lives that worsen when disaster comes. Below are areas impacted by climate change. One is food production. The second is fishing. Third is food security. The fourth is water availability. And the next is health. And the next is sudden onset disaster. And the other one is economic impact. And the last one is mobility and displacement. These areas were affected by the many climatic changes and were identified as unpredictable. Rainfall patterns, increased flooding, increases in temperature, increased severity of tropical storms, sea level rises, increase in the severity of coastal erosion. Based on our findings, climate change is impacting on persons with disabilities in two ways. One is climate change is increasing the negative impact of pre-existing exclusion. The second is climate change is creating new risk and new negative impact. From our research also and findings, we urge our governments to recognize and respond to the potential risk that climate change is creating for persons with disability in the Pacific, including the magnification of prior risk and the creation of new risk. The second is to take active measures to ensure persons with disability and their representative organizations are consulted and meaningfully engage in climate-related planning, policy, and budget development, implementation, and evaluations. The third one is support and strengthen capacity building programs of persons with disabilities to participate in climate decision making that concerns them. The fourth is acknowledge that persons with disability can equally play the role of climate actors, can contribute effectively to decision making processes, and must not be viewed as a passive recipient of climate adaptation programs. Five, ensure that the concept of preconditions into inclusion of persons with disabilities is embedded in climate mitigation and adaptation policies and programs. Preconditions to inclusion have six themes: accessibility, accessibility, assistive devices, support devices, social protection, community-based rehabilitation, and non-discrimination. The sixth is to address the differential impact of climate change and identify and respond to the needs of persons with disabilities of all genders and impairment types in rural, urban, and remote locations. Develop climate-related preparedness, adaptation, and mitigation strategies that not only address the current barriers and risks faced by persons with disabilities, but also anticipate the emerging and future risk of climate change. Eight, recognize and draw on the capabilities, knowledge, and experiences of persons with disabilities to contribute to climate-related preparedness, adaptation, and mitigation. As you can see, we have some photos here. So I'll use the tomato with the resource teams, how they play their role. So they have they develop their skills on how to work with the CRPT articles, and so those resource teams are tools. From our findings, and the overall is persons with disabilities have limited access to resources to secure a livelihood and few opportunities to ensure food security. As resources become scarcer, such as from limited and for agriculture from saltwater intrusion and rising sea levels, and competition for scarce resources increases, persons with disability face further exclusion and marginalization. Our findings indicate that women with disabilities face additional barriers. Such as maintaining health, well-being during time of water scarcity. So further research on access to resources and the current and future impact of climate change on women with disabilities would be helpful. Additional related work is needed on understanding the impact of climate change on persons with disability. This From this research, persons with disabilities will with links to establish OPTs. We can assume that these participants from our organizations have trying to develop to create the OPTs in other countries so that they can train them on how to be a good resource in CRPT, and they can advocate in outer islands for themselves. Thank you.
Hope it's not a boy's voice again. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Again, so we've heard about Kevin talking about the rights base and experiences from Kiribati. I'll be talking about the service perspective for persons with disability in terms of the rights base. So I just have one slide only. So the rights to rehabilitation and assistive technology services for persons with disability. In the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, there's over 52 articles, but the key ones for us that is related to rehabilitation and assistive technology services is up on the slide. It's just one slide which I will talk through that. So from a government perspective, in terms of service delivery for persons with disability, we know that in the region, in the Pacific region, a lot of countries have ratified a convention on the rights of persons with disability. But how many of these countries are actually implementing these rights? And this is where research is really important for us to provide those evidence to our governments, to development partners to look into supporting rehab and assistive technology services for persons with disability in the region. So I have up on the slide around 4 articles there. So the first article is around personal mobility, and if you have time, you can look it up. So it talks about services for persons with disability need to be run or provided through a service that is recognized, that meets the standards. It also has to run through or delivered by people qualified to deliver rehab and assistive technology services. In terms of accessibility, in my context where I work, accessibility, we look at infrastructure designs for health facilities. In the region, in Papua New Guinea, and I believe across the Pacific region, a lot of our health facilities, they do not meet the accessibility standards for inclusion for people with disabilities. When I say accessibility, in terms of the ramps, in terms of accessible toilets, etc. The next article on Article 25 on health. Most times our health services, we have great mechanisms but that are not inclusive of persons with disabilities. We know that the right to health is a universal right for all of us, but when it comes to persons with disability accessing health services, sometimes our rights are denied because the system does not accommodate for us. And then we have Article 26 around rehabilitation and habilitation, having a proper rehabilitation services for persons with disability in place in our health systems across the Pacific region. And there's some lessons from Papua New Guinea in terms of accessibility design. We've just started recently including accessibility standards into our health infrastructure design. And that is, that's Papua New Guinea, but what about the rest of our Pacific region? So again, we need to do research in there to provide those evidence to show that we need to look into infrastructure designs promoting accessibility standards for persons with disability. One of the lessons from Papua New Guinea also is extending the rehabilitation services in Papua New Guinea to PNG is very big. We have 22 provincial hospitals. As I speak, there's only 7 provincial hospitals that have rehab services. It makes it very challenging for people with disabilities in other places to go and access the service. As we know, PNG in the Pacific region is the largest Pacific Island country with the largest population. The diabetic rate in PNG, one of our big hospitals in Papua New Guinea, has a amputation rate of 2 to 3 amputations per week. But yet, the services around rehab is not effective to meet the demand. So research in that area to provide data and evidence will help to get people to think in that direction to improve rehab services, not only in PNG, but across the region. And then the workforce capacity around rehabilitation and assistive technology services. Persons with disability need good rehab and assistive technology services. Without these resources, we cannot be able to participate meaningfully. We cannot be included in the society. So I just want to stress on that. The workforce around rehabilitation and assistive technology region in the Pacific, there is a big gap, and we need to put research work in there to identify, to collect data to prove that there is need to build capacity. In Papua New Guinea, we are localizing the prosthetics and orthotic training, and the vision is that that will become a training hub for the Pacific region to train more prosthetists and orthotists to meet the demand of that high rate of amputations going through the hospitals because of diabetes. So that's one lesson from Papua New Guinea. Assistive products. Assistive products is a precondition for us. Without it, we cannot participate. There is no research, or less research, probably no research done around assistive technology. Assistive technology, when I say assistive technology, I'm referring to wheelchairs, blind canes, prosthetic limbs, hearing aids, etc. For assistive technology, we need services to be running to do the repair, maintenance, and follow-up, and also for the government to take ownership. Most times we see that our partners in the region, they come in and they give us a container full of goodies, but there is no sustainability. Assistive devices or assistive technology doesn't work that way. It needs a service to be able to maintain it, to be able to give that support to the client so that the client can continue to do what he needs to do in life. So in PNG, the prosthetics and orthotic services has been around since 1967, but we've never had our list on the medical and dental catalog for Papua New Guinea. And only in 2018, we did that. That is really good, but the sad thing is, it's not prioritized. And most times, our friends with disability, they complain that we are not doing enough. And that is true. We're not doing enough to prioritize funding. But if we have evidence to prove that in terms of patient data collected, we can be able to make it a priority. But sometimes, just looking at the figures, just looking at who comes through the service is also important, but we don't get that recognition up there. Lessons learned from PNG, again, the final one is inclusion of persons with disability. We've had my colleagues talk about that. Persons with disability need to be included in all the discussions to shape conversations, because disability is cross-cutting, it's a cross-cutting issue, whether it's about education, employment, or climate change. Disability, there is always a group of people in the community that we live in the Pacific region, that has a disability, and that one way or the other, they are going to be affected. And how do we address that in an emergency, in a disaster, rehabilitation services, professionals in rehabilitation services need to know how to respond in a disaster when it comes to persons with disability. So I'd like to draw our attention back to why we're here. We are talking about disability, equity, and rights based for us, persons with disability. Without evidence, we cannot prove a lot of things. We cannot make things happen. So again, there is less research work done around rehabilitation and assistive technology, including disability as well. With that, I'll stop and invite my next colleague up. Thank you. All right. Good morning. Thank you. I guess let me start by saying that the struggle is real. I've been sitting down coaching my colleagues to say, don't worry, it'll be all right. Now it's my turn. All right, anyway, my 10 minutes, because I represent an organization of persons with disabilities, the 10 minutes that I have given to present will briefly focus on highlighting the value of donor support in framing the debate, in framing the narrative as to how persons with disabilities are addressed. Then on another side, the added value of or the strength of persons with disabilities through the organizations they represent to ensure that we are keeping true to the meaning of equity and rights. So to do that, I will focus on 4 things, which will be who we are as an organization, our key achievements since Samoa ratified the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as challenges. As we all know, without challenges, there are no achievements. Then recommendations, knowing that I was given an opportunity to speak on my lived experience. However, I see it also as an opportunity to speak and acknowledge the added value of others who contribute to my success, who then contribute to the success of the organization I work with as a whole. Because in the organization I work with, I am only a driver. And if you know that I will continue to say we, acknowledging that I also, in the preparation of this presentation, we worked alongside with our other colleague who is also a staff of our organization. So let's. Okay, so who are we as an organization? Our organization is called Nua Nua Ole Alofa, and that is the local translation of Rainbow of Love in English. So the rainbow, as you all know, has 7 colors, and the 7 colors represent the diverse in terms of the disabilities of the people we work with, and as well as the diversity in terms of the approach to respond to their various priorities and needs. So the organization was established in 2001 as the National Advocacy Organization of Persons with Disabilities. It is the only organization in Samoa that is governed and managed by persons with disabilities. An umbrella for 4 affiliates, an organization of persons who are blind, an organization of persons who are deaf, an organization of persons with physical disabilities, as well as those with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. The reason behind this is we believe as an organization that the stronger the movement, the term is determined by how the various groups of persons with disabilities advocate on their specific issues. Next. As of today, the organization has over 3,000 something members. It's because we continue to register people with disabilities for the newly established social protection program for persons with disabilities. So we cannot tell you as of today as to how many exactly are registered as persons with disabilities. Our vision is to ensure that Samoa is a barrier-free and inclusive society for persons with disabilities. And we do this by creating opportunities for persons with disabilities to be empowered, to contribute to their societies, both as beneficiaries of development and as people who can do decision making. Next. So, as I said, Samoa has been supported by a lot of development partners. And DFAT indeed played a really critical role in ensuring that Samoa, along with other countries, ratified the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So prior to our ratification in 2016, DFAT, alongside with the government of Samoa and with the strong support of Nuanua Olealofa and its members, worked to develop what we call the Samoa Disability Program. The Samoa Disability Program and its 4 outcomes really focused on supporting the efforts of the government of Samoa, including strengthening the capacity of persons with disabilities to ratify the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So Samoa became a party to the convention in 2016. And before that, Samoa, in its initial efforts, one of them was the fact that we have been the very first country to take and to use the Disability Washington Questions, which is the tool to collect data on disability in its national data collection efforts. But before, the only question we have on our national data is, do you have a person with a disability in your household? And because of that, we have very limited data because of the negative connotation which attached with the word disability. Next. So after ratification, donors, development partners, training institutions began to recognize persons with disabilities as partners and began to invite us to conduct an access audit of facilities, physical environment, communication and information, as well as public facilities that are open to the public. This is our commitment to fulfill Article 9 of Persons with Disabilities, which is also a precondition to our inclusion in society, accessibility. We've set up CRPD resource team, which is another milestone in the development of the organization, as the group then responsible for making sure that we raise awareness on the rights of persons with disabilities to community as well as government and its partners. This is our commitment to ensure that we keep true to the meaning of nothing about us without us. Because of this support, we contribute as a valued partner in legislative reform efforts of government. The reason one we contributed to was the submissions to amend the National Provident Fund Act, that is to regulate our social protection measure. We were able to reach out, and this is not just the effort of DFAT, but DFAT and its partners, for instance, CARE, through the humanitarian program. We were able to reach out to our underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities, for instance, those who are deaf, by ensuring that the information are available in the accessible formats for them. We were able to access institutional efforts, which then helped the organization to grow and to do its work better. The financial support of DFAT and its partners enabled the organization to be part of regional research efforts, both as beneficiaries and as contributors. For instance, the research to analyze the level of access to essential services by women and girls with disabilities. The research to ensure access to justice, which is a fundamental article of CRBD, Article 13, by women and girls. This support also helped NOLA and its members to undertake by themselves researches on the issues that matter to us. For instance, the analysis of the level of access to clean water and sanitation for persons with disabilities. As we all know, access to water supply is far too different than being able to get water or to have a shower by yourself. The hazard vulnerability capacity analysis, which then support persons with disabilities and their household to think about, consider, and develop household response and preparedness plans. Lastly, but not the least, this support, as we all know, Rome was not built in one day. This support, after how many years, now contributes successfully to the endorsement of the first ever social protection program for persons with disabilities, which now persons with disabilities are now enjoying. Next. Well, there are far too many achievements, and I can speak for a year about them. But because of timing, I have to acknowledge the support of partners and donors who have and contribute to the success of our organization and its people. And one of the classic examples of the work that we do, which is successful, from building strengths within our community, within the people we work with, and amongst government ministries, up to the high level, national, international, and regional conversation is, of course, people with disabilities themselves. And one classic example is sitting with us, our own staff member who began himself as a volunteer, then with the support by various partners, he is a member of our resource team, and he is also a member of our access audit team. So we see how the journey
of persons with disabilities continue to inspire others through the support of our donor partners. However, we cannot, as I said, without challenges, there are no achievements. The experience of NOLA as an organization, sometimes we are called to consultations to discuss issues or to discuss proposals with very limited information provided to us, with high-level documents, which most of the words you cannot get in the normal dictionary, which then make it so hard for organizations of persons with disabilities who are already struggling with finding the funding to sustain their work and themselves, to look at these documents, let alone contribute and translate them into meaningful results for us. Because it's far too good to have a document, and it's very well to have a consultation, but if at the end of the day no one gets anything out of it because of how it has been done, then sometimes the guiding frameworks, for instance, procurement procedures, reporting procedures, budgeting procedures, sometimes they're not accessible to persons with disabilities who are doing these kind of jobs. And with very limited or no trainings, they are not able to do this to the best of their abilities, especially when accessing these funds are going through government processes, where government processes are far too different from OBD processes. So we need resources to ensure that we keep up. Not only keep up, but we are able to do our work well to support the credibility of our organization. Okay, next. Well, I believe all the other things have been touched on by our other colleagues. But in terms of key messages from us, we believe that to ensure that we contributed to the development of the next equity and rights strategy, and also the strategy for all by DFAT, by the Government of Australia. So to ensure that we continue to keep true to the meaning of these strategies and all other strategies, we believe that nothing is irrelevant to persons with disabilities. So never assume our inclusion without talking to persons with disabilities, because that's why we have fancy projects, but they always go wrong because we talk to the wrong people, or we include people halfway through the project. In terms of data, I haven't included this here, but in terms of data, we have far too many data that are available, but not disaggregated by persons with disabilities. And that's the issue. Ensure preconditions to inclusion, as alluded to by our other colleague, is embedded in all programs, as all discussions, all developments, all programs matter to us. Ensure that in all developments, resources are allocated to support the work of persons with disabilities through the organizations they represent as beneficiaries and as people who can advocate for us and who can tell you how to do the work well. Lastly, but not the least, in all research efforts, please research with us, build with us, not for us. I thank you. So I believe I was told to, if anyone has any questions, our colleagues will be giving you the mic. Otherwise, I'm done.
Australian National University, Dr. Amanda Watson here at the ANU. My question is for the final speaker from NOLA in Samoa. You mentioned the inclusion of questions you referred to as, I think, the Washington questions in data collection. I wasn't sure if you meant the census in Samoa or how those questions are used, but also I must admit I don't know what they are. So if you wouldn't mind explaining what the Washington questions are and what data collection they're being used in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, the Washington questions on disability, and we have managed as a government to include this Washington question. It is a tool to collect data and to reflect the prevalence of persons with disabilities. So the tool is focusing on the functional limitations of individuals with disabilities to do certain things in life, one of which, the tool has 4 main domains. So one of the questions of the tool is, can you see without using your glasses? Or do you have difficulty seeing without using your glasses, even without using your glasses? So that your domains are, no, I do not have any difficulties at all, with less difficulties, a lot of difficulties, and cannot do it at all. So if your answer is between I don't have difficulties or I have some difficulties, then it actually means that you are good, like you don't have a disability. But if your answers on the various categories, from seeing, from walking steps, from managing yourself, from communicating with others, there's actually 6 main domains. So if your answers fall in the categories of cannot do it at all and a lot of difficulties in any of these areas I mentioned, then you are counted as a person with some degree of disability. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much to the presenters. I'm Miranda Forsyth. I'm in the School of Regulation and Global Governance at the ANU, and I do a lot of work on sorcery accusation-related violence in Papua New Guinea and also around the world. And in many countries around the world, there's a very clear link between people with disability and belief in sorcery and magic. So sometimes people are accused because they have a disability, or sometimes a child is born with a disability and then that is blamed on somebody else. And I'm just wondering, I've come across references to this happening in Papua New Guinea, but not on a, the data hasn't shown a really strong link in the way that it is, for example, in Africa. And I'm wondering, is that because of the limitations of the data that you've been talking about, or is that not such a strong phenomenon in Papua New Guinea or other countries in the region?
Yeah, I agree on that. The data, when it comes to collecting data around persons with disability in terms of sorcery, that data doesn't reflect very well. And sometimes it's because we are not included. The questions around disability is not included in there. Again, going back to, disability is cross-cutting, yet a lot of programs, a lot of government sectors do not capture disability questions in there. So even like children that are affected because of they're blamed for being, through sorcery, that data doesn't come to health department also, even in terms of the services as well. Sometimes we don't see women and children come through the service as well. So to answer your question, there is no specific questions around disability related. Yes, yes. Because we know that Papua New Guinea has over 800 languages, cultures, different beliefs, the highlands region to the coastal, or to the north, south, east, and west, the cultures are so very different. And yes, most times people believe that when children with disabilities, children are born with disabilities, it must be related to a sorcery thing, or and sometimes this is assumptions. If we have the data to prove it, then the research to prove it, then we can say that is true. And again, there is no specific questions around disability related for that.
If I may quickly respond to that, also from the human rights perspective, yes, Samoa does have some kind of, I think it's a general thing for many Pacific countries that, it's a belief of the Old Testament. The Old Testament, that whenever somebody is born with some kind of disability, then they are related to something that's committed by either the mother or the father. However, I just like to reinforce that with the human rights approach to disability, we are in this moment where we believe that disability, and that's the practice we are doing as an OPD, disability is indeed a result of a negative interaction between a person and his or her environment. Otherwise, everyone is equal. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aka. I come from Kiribati, and I'm also from the School of Regulation and Global Governance. I want to begin by sharing a comment, I guess an observation, and then follow up with the two questions. So my observation is I find it really powerful to start the morning listening to the presentations. Thank you so much for unpacking the nuanced definitions of equity, because it really addresses the challenge of the work that I do as a researcher. And I think to wrap up the presentation with our Samoan speaker saying, sit with us, work with us, and travel with us, I think this really strike me so in the heart. I feel like this is really the center of the work that we do in research. I've been sitting this week in a number of events, and asking that all these things that we've been hearing, presentation after presentation, and then when you speak to this morning and say, but when are we going to implement them? I think this is such a powerful reminder to all of us that, research is valuable, but we also need to see tangible outputs on the ground wherever we work. So key takeaways for me are, we have to balance research and implementation, and there is need for strengthening access to resources, but also access to services and goods, which we tend to overlook, especially myself in my work in migration. And I feel that this is such an important area for us to address. I don't want to take up all the time, but let me pose my question now, and it's really to all of us here sitting today, the panelists rather. So the first question is with regard to isolation. And because we come from Kiribati and Tabaya Maori and ang Tamearo ang presentation ting abongay, I'm really curious to understand how you close the gaps when it comes to a country that is more ocean than land? How do you make sure that everyone is included in all these challenges that you presented on climate change? I really want to learn more about how you conduct your work. And second question is labor mobility, because I work in that space. I feel like this is an area that's really addressed, and I'm looking at the way that labor mobility is a building of cultivating resilience for our people to be able to migrate in the context of climate change if they want to. And of course, we cannot address this topic also without considering how to make sure that the most vulnerable in our communities have pathways to also migrate. So I'm really keen to see how we are included in the discussions, maybe at the Ministry of Labour. Do we have some members of Te Toa Matua who are able to sit down with the team in Kiribati and discuss not just migration, but access to jobs nationally to begin with? I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For the first time, we persons with disability don't know what to do, but we learn a lot that during our gathering, and we also talk about issues that persons with disability have been facing, a lot of the labor mobility, and so we're trying we invite some part of the ministry that related to with the link to the work we are doing. So we also invite them and have consultations with them, and they also want to know what are the barriers that persons with disability are facing. So from our collecting, and we also have because we have different affiliate members, like we have persons with disability, like physical, those wheelchairs users, and those who are hard hearing. And so by working together with those persons with disability, we try to show the governments that those issues are persons with disability are facing, that there are gaps in the policy, so that we know that those policies have been implemented and have been reviewed, but they are still gaps because of there is no consultations with the persons with disability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Allow me to respond quickly to this question from the perspective of the Pacific Disability Forum, where some of its projects relating to climate change, both Samoa and Kiribati are part of as focus countries. These projects, of course, allowed organizations of persons with disabilities to reach out through consultations to their national humanitarian actors, and provide them with awareness raising programs onto how to better support persons with disabilities in evacuation centers, for instance, how to make the evacuation center inclusive of persons with disabilities, and how to provide recovery support for persons with disabilities. Like, for instance, how can they ensure that the disaster preparedness and response plan take into account things like assistive devices for those who need that, and extra support to the evacuation center for those families who will be vulnerable as a result of. So I hope that to some extent help you answer that question.
Thank you, Peter Jamison of Charity Pacific Aid. Our focus and our vision at the moment is to rebuild schools and support them that have been destroyed by cyclones 5 years ago in Vanuatu. that haven't been rebuilt to this date. Part of, very central to our vision as well, is to include hope schools within those schools where children with disabilities can have access to education, and also to help change the community mindset in terms of towards disabilities. My question is, I just want to know, what are some other practical strategies from your experience have you had that can change that community attitude? I know that one person I spoke to in a village said to me their attitude was they're sick, they need to be put somewhere by themselves to learn. And my attitude is that they need to be integrated. You're fighting against that sort of mindset in the village situation. So, as I said, are there any practical strategies that you can share that would help us empower the people there to own this and to change the mindset, transform the mindset?
Thank you. I think I'll quickly respond, and my colleagues will add, since I have the mic to start with. Well, for Samoa, for instance, well, before I talk about the strategy, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which Vanuatu was the first country to ratify, talk about, in Article 24, talks about inclusive education for all, making sure that students with disabilities are not just put in classrooms, but with the adequate support. So that's one thing. So the convention indeed does not promote segregation of students with disabilities to places where they learn alone, even though we know that there are some students who might need that support, but CRPD indeed promotes inclusive education. In terms of the strategies for Samoa, we do awareness raising to schools, and to do that, we use persons with disabilities who have been journeyed through inclusive education to tell their story and to tell how the teachers treat them, to tell how their families supported them in the journey. Also, we have service providers who provide specific reasonable accommodation, for instance, who provide Braille for students who are blind, who provide sign language interpreters for students who are deaf, who provide other support for those who have autism. So with this, they go to the schools where their students are 1 day a week or 3-4 days a week to help the teacher and the students discuss their goals, their educational goals, what educational support is needed, blah, blah, blah. But the students go into their regular schools. Why? Because we believe that students with disabilities need to have friends, interact with others, and it is boring, just like us. It is boring for us to go to the school in the morning and you keep looking at other blind students whom you've seen like since your year one. So we need a change of environment anyway. But to do that, we need to ensure that there is adequate support like Braille, sign language in place. And on top of that, it takes a village to raise a child. So the critical support is within the parents and the families themselves. To answer your question, I'll share some experience from Papua New Guinea. So in PNG, we have the inclusive education unit that looks at children with disabilities in schools. But we do now have students going through the tertiary institutions, but they need additional support as well. Sometimes when tertiary institutions cannot accommodate for the accessibility, they ask students to stream into other courses. It's like they force them to go and do something else because the environment is not accessible for them. So for children with disabilities, the inclusive education's unit promotes or looks at including children with disabilities in the mainstream, in the same school, in the same primary school, for example. They don't segregate, they put them together and they learn together. What our challenge is with the assistive technologies, there's a lot of data for children who are visually impaired or hard of hearing, but those data doesn't come to health department for us to plan around assistive technology. So if we are looking at supporting the existing systems, we have to look at the governance system, what's available, the gaps there, and then how do we support that. And looking at the community level, I'd like to share my experience as when I was a child growing up. I acquired my disability at the age of 11. And I had to adjust for a lot of things. But first of all, I was very confused what happened to me, and I had to adjust. The most important thing for me was trying to accept myself. But my support system in the community started inside my family home. It started with my parents. My father is my greatest hero. He looked outside the box on how to create that enabling environment for me to learn. In school, when I was growing up, I was known, as you said, a sick person, a sick child in school, but I wasn't sick. I was okay. I just was different because I was using a prosthetic limb. And in the communities, it was very hard. At that time, there was no inclusive education. It just happened, just some years back. But at that time, when I was growing up, there was no inclusive education unit to look at my rights or look at how they could create an inclusive environment for me. So the community that I lived in, it started in my family home. So really, in the Pacific, it's our families, it's our communities that needs to, first of all, accept who we are, understand us, and then how do they create that enabling environment for us. And if we try to bring something outside in and tell our communities or our families, this is how you do it, it's not gonna work because we have our own structures and systems within our families and our communities. And so with that support that I got from my family, with my parents, I was able to progress through life. But there were challenges on the way. But he made me strong along the way, and everything else was for me to figure it out. And this is where I am today. So I believe that for children with disabilities, the support system starts within the families, and then it comes out to the community. And as Fatino was saying, a lot of advocacy and a sensitization needs to happen in the community and in the governance systems, whether it's education or health or agricultural life, climate change, whatever that is. Sensitization is really, really important to happen at the governance level. Thank you. Do you want to say?
I think we just have to finish up now so that the next session can get started. But thank you so much to everyone for taking part in the panel today. It's so lovely to have you here, and enjoy the next 2 days as well. You can sit back and relax now, and thank you, the audience.